You're tuned in to Women in America, the podcast that dives deep into the issues shaping gender equality in the US and beyond. Hosted by Pari and Eve, public health professionals by day and content creators by passion, we bring you expert insights and actionable strategies to push the fight for equality forward in today's America. On this episode, Congresswoman Becca Balint joins us to discuss the Epstein files and give us the insider scoop on what it's like working in the halls of Congress to get them released. Let's dive in. Everybody, I'm so pleased to have you meet virtually Congresswoman Balint. She's with me today to talk about the Epstein files because that is the gift that keeps on giving and taking simultaneously somehow.
Yes.
And, as context for people who are like, wait, why are we still talking about this?
Yeah.
We're still talking about this because the Epstein files haven't been released, right? Despite what people are saying. And as recently as within the last 24 hours of us recording this episode, there was a vote in the Senate about whether or not to release the files. And I really think that more than anything that Eve and I have been sharing across our socials or across previous podcast episodes, Rep. Balint is going to be able to give us the tea on what's going on. So actually, if you wouldn't mind starting with just doing a quick overview of like the many different votes that have happened on this, because I think it's hard for, us lay folks to kind of keep track of like all of the multiple, both like restrictions, petitions, calls for action, and then votes to not release, and then all of that kind of stuff. So if you
I really appreciate that because it is really confusing. So there is a particular committee within the House called the Rules Committee. And, simply put, the Rules Committee does a lot of work with figuring out which bills actually make it through that committee to go onto the floor for a vote, just like bare bones. Okay. And so a couple, I guess now, over a month ago, right before the August recess, my colleagues on the Rules Committee, they put a vote to their colleagues saying, hey, look, you have an opportunity right now to actually deliver the thing that you said you were all going to do for your base, because that's what you all ran on, that you were going to release the files. Here's your opportunity. Here's a straight up or down vote. And they lost that vote. They would not commit to releasing them. And so then there have been votes I serve on the Judiciary Committee. We actually had an entire hearing yesterday that was supposed to be about marking up a bunch of bills, but we got very much bogged down on Epstein because, once again, we gave them all of these opportunities to vote on the record within Judiciary to force the release of the files. So simultaneously down the hall, the Oversight Committee yesterday was continuing to dive into documents that have been able to come to the light of the day. The only reason they've been able to is because Democrats within the Oversight Committee insisted on pushing that and subpoenaing the Epstein estate to get the notorious birthday book, which is
yeah. But quick clarification
yeah.
before we get into the birthday book. These committees, the rules, regulations, oversight, these are all made up of people from along the aisle, right? Both sides of the aisle?
Both sides. The important piece for people to understand is they're made up of members from both sides of the aisle, but in every single committee, because the Republicans control the House right now, they have more seats, they actually have more members in each of those committees, okay? Because it's proportional, right? So we say when the Democrats are in control, we will have the gavels back, meaning we will be in charge of all those committees. But right now, we don't have that, right? So we can't have a lot of success within the committee system because we're always outnumbered, okay? So there is an interesting dynamic that is happening with a Republican by the name of Thomas Massie, who's a Republican from Kentucky.
I'm smiling because I remember the memes that came out about Thomas Massie after the big vote right before the recess, where he just like left and was like nowhere to be found for.
Yeah, so Massie is pretty much consistently the only Republican right now that will buck Donald Trump, that will openly he's it. And I think he's a member from Kentucky. I always say Thomas Massie and I disagree on most things. I'm on Judiciary with him. He knows who he is. He votes his values. And
Mhm.
even if people threaten him, even if he's targeted by Trump, it doesn't seem to bother him, partly because he also knows his constituents. So Thomas Massey teamed up with Ro Khanna, who is a representative on the Democratic side, and they got something together called a discharge petition.
Mhm.
This is, simply put, a way for us, even in the minority, to try to bring a bill to the floor. Okay. And so you have to get 218 signatures on a discharge petition to force a bill to the floor, even, there's a way to get it even around the Speaker of the House that absolutely does not want all of these files released. Okay. So the
Right.
discharge petition says release the files, release everything. If there's nothing to hide, then release them.
You know,
We are,
when I first
yeah,
saw the discharge petition, I have to admit, the first, like, thought I had was like, "Oh my gosh, wait, is this what it feels like to have people cooperate with each other?" Because it had been so long in, like, my advocacy career since I had seen both a Republican and a Democrat co-sign
yes,
a bill together, and I was like, "Wait, what?"
yes,
So, anyway,
yes,
I just wanted to say that to be like,
completely,
yeah,
completely.
it's, like,
And
such
all,
a reflection of where we're at that was, like, the thing that I, like, latched onto about that.
absolutely. You're like, wow, what year is
Yeah.
this? I know, is exactly. Well, the other piece of this that was so interesting when they had that petition first filed is Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna invited uh, the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's sexual abuse and trafficking to come to Capitol Hill to
Mm.
both give their stories behind closed doors to members of the Women's Caucus, members of the Oversight Committee, and also to speak to the press about what they wanted, what they wanted from those of us on Capitol Hill. And at that press conference, there were only 4 Republicans who were willing to stand with the victims. So I want people to sort of wrap their mind about that. Out of that entire conference, only 4 Republicans were willing to show up to support the victims.
Yeah.
That was Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Mhm.
Lauren Boebert, and Nancy Mace.
Yeah, big surprise.
So, right? So politics, strange bedfellows, we all say it, but like, it is shocking, right, that only
Mhm.
one Republican man would stand with the victims of this horrific abuse. And so, and Thomas Massey has been out there on the news. He's been saying, this is outrageous. I can't believe that I'm the only one. And that these 3 women who I can say I disagree with on everything, pretty much.
Yeah.
But what
Same.
what they said at that press conference was actually very supportive of the victims. And that's what's being lost in all of this, is that the victims have still not had justice.
Mhm.
They have to be at the center of the work that we're doing. And so, it is going to continue to be an issue because, one, the president keeps lying about everything. 2, all of these Republicans who ran on this issue now are running as far away from it as they can, or hoping the press doesn't ask them a follow-up question. And at the center of it is, how do we finally get some justice for these women who were horribly abused as girls, and nobody stood up for them, not even the US attorney who was supposed to be there, in Florida when this all came to light. And Jeffrey Epstein got a sweetheart heart deal from the U.S. attorney who was working for the first Trump administration. So it
Mhm.
calls everything into question.
Mhm.
So I'm sure you've got some follow up questions, but there's like so many directions we could go in.
Well, I'm first, I wanna just, for the last point you made about the sweetheart deal, now
Yeah.
Jane is having a sweetheart deal. Like, she's in the lowest security possible
Yes.
situation. I mean, she's continuing to live her life, and
Yes.
people are painting her as a victim when she is the perpetrator, right? And, I wanted.
Convicted. This is the thing. Convicted
Yes.
on
Yeah.
trafficking, convicted, right? A jury found that she did these horrible things, And the Trump administration is not only talking to her and listening to this compulsive liar, but are, as you said, they're transferring her to a low security facility, and still won't say that they categorically will not pardon her. Like,
Right.
why are we not hearing that from the White House? Why
Yeah.
are they talking to a pedophile?
I mean, I'm gonna speak solely for myself here.
Yes.
I think it's pretty clear why we're not
Yes,
hearing
I know.
the
I
White
know. Of
House.
course. I get it.
Also,
I get it.
I realized convictions don't mean anything anymore, so here we are. But one thing I wanted to point out
Yes.
is I love that you are bringing the perspective onto survivors, right? Because last week we saw the Epstein survivors press conference, and I want to hear from you, like, what was the vibe in Congress when that was happening? Because from the folks who were outside of Congress, right, we were seeing these brave women step up, put their faces in public, tell their stories. And I call them women, but they were girls when this
Yes,
happened.
when it happened.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they've been living with this for some of them for decades. And it's so shameful because, even I work a lot in sexual violence and sexual violence prevention. And one of the hardest things when it comes to legislating those cases is burden of proof. And in this case, we have the most proof we've ever had for a sexual
That's
assault.
right.
And it still doesn't seem to matter, right?
That's
And
right.
so I think about the fact that, like, women and girls across this country, I just had a daughter, and I think about
Congratulations.
thank you so much. The
Yeah.
America that she is going to grow up in, just like reminding her over and over again
Yeah.
that she doesn't matter. And I think about how, the president greenlit the military flyover while
Yes.
the survivors press conference was
They're
happening.
literally trying to silence them.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Yes.
With the military. Like,
Yes.
if that's not intimidation, then I don't know
Yes.
what is, right? So I would love
Yeah.
to hear, like, that was how I was feeling, and it just felt like such a
Yes.
metaphor for how women in America are treated. And I would
Right.
love to hear, like, you in the halls of Congress constantly fighting with your colleagues to
Yeah.
see reason on this. What's that like for you? As a woman
Yeah.
yourself who's standing with survivors, who the people who
Yeah.
work right beside you don't seem to be doing that. How does it make you feel? And
Oh,
what's the
it's
transition?
it's absolutely brutal. It's absolutely brutal. I felt completely and totally wrecked the last couple days because of the callousness
Yeah.
of these colleagues. And one of the things that I brought up yesterday in the Judiciary Committee when we were talking about these issues, I said, to your point, I said, what does real courage look like? What does real bravery look like? It looks like survivors coming to testify and to speak here on Capitol Hill before reporters. They know they're going to get death threats. They know that they're going to be tweeted about. They were Democrats and Republican women. That's the other thing. Okay. And this one woman, I can't remember her name, and she said, Donald Trump, I am a Republican woman. And you calling us a hoax is so demeaning. Come down here. Come down and hear our stories. And that takes incredible courage. And one of the things that I said in committee was, we all think of ourselves, on our best days, that we're here on Capitol Hill, and we're fighting the good fight, and we're sticking up for our constituents, and we're being brave and courageous. And I said, look, if you're not risking anything, you're not being brave.
Mhm.
Period. Right? So, all of you folks who won't sign that discharge petition because you're afraid of the pushback from your constituents or from the White House, if you're afraid of that and you're not sticking up for these survivors, you're not being brave. The
No.
story that you're telling about yourself as a courageous leader, you're not. And I was completely and totally moved to tears by the bravery that I saw from the survivors that day. And I think what happens often with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle is they just put it in a different file. They don't want to have to deal with the emotions of that. They don't want to have to reflect on whether that was their wife or their daughter or their neighbor who they care about. These are other women. This thing happened, but it's past, and I'm just keeping it in this file over here because I don't want to crack that open. Because if I crack that open, then I have to admit about myself that I am actually complicit
Mm-hmm.
in protecting powerful men who have abused women.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail on the head. In my opinion, they are already complicit. And in fact,
Yeah.
their inaction about this actually makes them even more complicit. But I, I've been thinking a lot about how different people are stepping into these spaces of courage. And one thing that I have a certain opinion on is
Yeah.
Nancy Mace's participation in this entire situation, right? So I'm looking at your expression and I'm trying not to laugh, but um, she uh the clip of her walking out of that private when survivors were sharing their stories in that room before their press conference, the clip of Nancy Mace walking out of that room crying went viral across platforms,
Right.
right? And it was one of those rare moments where you experience like true blue compassion for someone who I should say it was one of those moments where I experienced true blue compassion for her despite genuinely hating every opinion she has, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then less than an hour later, she tweeted about how Trump is actually a hero and has been aiding these survivors by like doing all the work that he's doing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then she signed the petition to release the files. So I guess I'm curious, like, do you feel like the even the allyship that you are receiving, not from Thomas Massey, because you've
Yeah.
spoken, but the allyship that you're receiving coming from strange places, do you feel like it's legitimate, or do you feel like there's a bit of performative, like, okay, they know that the Republican majority is never going to sign this thing, and so they're kind of putting their names on it to be on the right side of history because they know in truth that what they're doing is wrong
Yeah.
by blocking these files? Let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I can't get in their heads, right? I can't get in their hearts. And, you speaking specifically about Representative Mace, I was on the floor yesterday debating with her about another of her attacks on the trans community, right? It's horrific. The language that she uses, the dehumanizing language that she uses against the trans community is shocking
Yeah.
and so hurtful. And so, you know, it's Congress. There's a whole lot of performative stuff that is happening around here. It's a 24-hour news cycle. Let's just name it. I actually don't spend a whole lot of energy trying to figure out what she's about. Just to be perfectly honest, like I think in so many instances she's shown us she's not an honest broker about things. So I don't
Mhm.
spend my energy on that. I just take the win. Say that is one less signature that we need, that we need to find. So right now, with the new members that have been sworn in on the Democratic side, we're basically down to we need
One.
one signature. And so I'm really focused on how do we continue to move the needle on getting another person and not spend so much time on what is her motivation, because I don't think anyone really understands that right now.
That's fair. And
Yeah.
honestly, I have to extend gratitude to you for being that honest about what Congress can sometimes be, because I think it's hard for people to admit that sometimes, but we know that that is in
Yeah,
fact true.
I mean, and it is one of the biggest challenges for someone like me who came up through my state legislature, and there are many of us who you sit in committee in the state legislature and you're actually getting shit done, right? You are
Mhm.
literally diving into the policy and you're trying to figure out how are we going to get this done? How are we going to bring in the partners to help get it done? And that's not what happens here. And so it's really challenging because especially for someone like me, I think very carefully about what I put forward on social media. I don't want to be driving the rage. I don't want to be driving the hatred. I don't, right? And yet, so much about this place is, well, what's your clip you're going to get?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's not healthy.
No, and it's really unfortunate because I feel like, I know this is unrelated to Epstein, but I feel
Yeah.
like the media landscape in the US has really shifted towards just like whatever generates the most emotional reaction as opposed to, or visceral reaction as opposed
Yes.
to like dialogue, right? And in my role as a creator and someone who works in reproductive health advocacy full time as my day job, I'm finding it harder and harder to achieve middle ground because there's no discourse happening anymore. And so I
Yeah.
sometimes feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I'm speaking about something.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying to get better at, like you said, moving the needle on certain issues because ultimately, like, we're all human beings, we're all Americans, we deeply care about this country. And I think that what has been interesting to me within the context of that media landscape is how there has been a surprising amount of cohesion when it comes to the Epstein files, like across the
Yeah.
aisle even. And I don't know if this is accurate from your end, but
Yeah.
my read of things with like all of like the polling and stuff that, we have to keep track of as creators is that part of what has moved the needle, even if it's like those 4 Republican votes on this, is the public pressure and involvement
Yeah.
and intrigue about this story. And I'm wondering if you think that that is in fact true and that what we need to do in order to help folks in Congress move the needle is continue to talk about it and continue to elevate it. Or
Yes.
if there's a different approach that you think that folks should be taking to sort of find the common discourse on this, because
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a time where you could just say that, hey, a pedophile is a bad person. And that was like a universally agreed upon statement. And
I'm laughing because it's so sick, right?
yeah,
It's so sick, right?
I mean, it is. It is. I'm also laughing as a coping mechanism because I'm kind
Right.
of at a loss for like how we've reached where we have reached. But
Yes.
now
We have, yeah.
sorry, I just
Yeah.
want to, now I somehow have to convince people that that's the case. Or
Yes.
even though when people agree with that, they like believe like, oh, well, he's not one. And we've somehow gone from like, pedophiles are bad to, well, only in certain circumstances. And, and I'm wondering, like, from your
Right.
perspective, you're meeting so many varied, your constituents range
Yeah.
in their political beliefs, their social
Yeah.
cultural beliefs.
Yeah.
What do you feel is like the common ground here that we can move forward with
Yeah.
as a community, as a population to try and really like help you and the
Yeah.
folks alongside you actually move the needle on this one?
This is this is the heart of it for me. This is what I think about obsessively each day, every day.
Mm,
What is it that as Americans, as members of a community, as Vermonters, in my case, what is it that we can agree on? And I feel like so many of those basic fundamentals that we used to all agree on, we can't anymore, right? To your point about pedophiles. And I think what I see happening in this particular situation is people believe that if you are a Republican and you are thinking about these issues, you believe at the heart of it, yes, that pedophiles are terrible, but we believe the pedophiles that are actually in the files, are Democrats. They're not
mm,
Republicans, right? And it's just this weird thing that happens. And I I think that all of us need to accept the fact that we, whatever team we're on, there are flawed people in every space, right?
absolutely.
There are flawed people in every space. And I think that, when even just, 2 decades ago, you still had a news environment where people could agree on sort of a basic platform of understanding of the world, right? You had the three big networks, and generally the anchors were like trying to communicate sort of the basic facts that we could all agree on. We don't have that anymore, right?
Mhm.
And so much of our constituency is it they're not even getting their news necessarily from print media or from the networks, whatever. Everybody's getting it in these short little clips. And to your point, which I thought was an excellent one, it's often about what's the thing that elicits the most emotional reaction, not deep reflection. Makes it very difficult to talk about real issues in a complicated, complex way. And I'm constantly trying to figure out what is the basic parts of humanity that we can agree on. And that's what scares me the most, is when I feel like I see in committee my colleagues talking in a way that leads me to believe they don't believe that everybody has basic dignity and humanity. That deeply disturbs me.
I mean, I think it should frankly deeply disturb any reasonable person, right? Because one of the things that I think we have left in the past is that there's no delineation anymore between politics and real life. Like, before, like for example, when I first started doing political advocacy, I used to hear from people, oh, I don't do politics. And my thought about that now is, that may have been okay 10 years ago. But now, like, you might not do politics, but politics is going to do you, because there is no longer a difference between politics and the culture and fabric of American society, right? And this is what I think the part that I really struggle with when it comes to the Epstein files is like, I have a hard time accepting, even though I think logically I know we have. Emotionally, I still have a hard time accepting that we have transitioned into a society that is just perfectly okay and fine with these kinds of egregious acts happening, right? And I think that when I say that to folks, either as a creator or in my own circles, one thing people are like, to your point about, oh, well, there's Democrats in the files. And I'm like, who cares? Like, genuinely, my own father could be in those files and I would want them released. Because, like, 100%. The fact that you think, you as in, like, the royal you, the fact that anyone thinks that a reasonable person would want to have any continued association with someone who is falling even within the circles associated with pedophiles is, like, truly mind-blowing to me. And so we try to work with both Democrat and Republican legislators, and that gap, even for us as like advocates, is getting larger and larger and larger. And in my day job, I used to do like advocacy around education or global health means back when USAID still existed, and we had Republican legislators that were massive supporters because, just exactly as you said, like, there wasn't this massive chasm between the two. And now I'm like, oh, are we entering into an age of America where we just truly are like divided? And I don't want to sound, pessimistic, but when I look at the Epstein file situation, it's hard not to feel like we are, because I'm like, this should be like something that we universally agree on. And it's not anymore.
What I see from folks on my side of the aisle versus what I see from folks on the other side of the aisle is that we have accepted that there will be life after Trump. Republicans are still operating as if everything they say, everything that they do, everything they tweet, every interview they give, that everything is about how is the White House going to respond to what I say, even if it's the truth. Even if I'm standing up for my own constituents. The triangulation here is, okay, I know the things that I need to do for the people back home, but every single time it's, am I going to be tweeted about? Am I going to be disparaged publicly? Right? So when you have that kind of fear and fealty for one person, it completely and totally skews your ability to reason, because it's always from that place of fear. And so that's what I see. I see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. They are completely trapped by their own fear. They are keeping themselves small so that they don't get noticed, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you said that, because I think you're right. It is easy to get bogged down in the minutia of, well, frankly, the barrage of bad news that happens every single day, right?
Yes.
To remind yourself that actually this is temporary. And I think that it's an interesting point that you bring up, even just from a working dynamic perspective, because I'm like trying to put myself in your shoes right now. And I'm just like, how does this woman stay sane? Like, actually, like, like, first of all, being a woman in power in the US is like fraught with nuance and challenges, right? Like,
100%.
let's be real. Anyone who says that's not true is smoking.
They're lying.
Yeah. But then to be in a position where you have to work twice as hard to get half as much, and then still be in an environment where everyone is trying to shut you down. Like, I just got to give you kudos. I don't know what your own like coping mechanisms are, but like you should like start a course on that or something. I think that family and community are so critical in these times. And I try to tell myself that a lot. I'm like, okay, enough internet for today, and I feel like you should be telling yourself enough Congress for today. And just like,
I do. Amanda Ripley is a writer who said in an op-ed a few months ago, she said, the news today is not fit for human consumption. She's a journalist saying that. And in this op-ed, she also said the open secret among so many journalists is that we're not reading the news anymore because it's so negative. And so for folks, listening, I think it is important. Obviously, we care about issues. That's why we're engaging on this platform. But it's okay to take some time away and remind ourselves that actually there are joyful things in the world. And actually there are inspiring people around us every day. And one of the things that I say to myself every morning as I walk to Congress, because I live on Capitol Hill, I always say, I wonder what interesting person I'm going to meet today. Because I always meet new people. I wonder what interesting person I'm going to meet. Because I can't live in the negativity all the time. Because I have to be able to fight those fights. I have to be able to turn it on when I need to. And if I'm exhausted, if I am completely beaten down by all of the horrible news, then I can't do that. And I want to be able to show up for my people back home.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I needed to speak with you today. So I am so grateful for you saying that and just reminding me of that. And also for bringing a little bit of levity to a situation that really doesn't have much. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I will continue to amplify your efforts as we go, because you're right, we do all have to stand in this together to try and move the needle on this. So appreciate you so much, Rep. Balint, for joining, and hope to speak with you again soon.
I'd love that.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Women in America. If you enjoyed it, share it with your network and follow us on social media at women_in America. See you next week.